All right, Hugh, ready, go.
I see two of me
And none of them.
and none of you. Greetings, everyone. Um, this is Friday, August, what, 7th, 8th?
Seventh.
7th, yes. And this is the Freiburg New Church Assembly. And I am remotely connected to the Freiburg New Church Assembly. Um, my name is Reverend Hugh Odhner, and I'm related to a number of the Odhners that are sitting in the audience. In fact, all of them. So I wanted to start out, as many of us did this week, with George Dole's sermon. His sermon was on the new church, and many of us took that as a jumping off part. Some, like Guard, giving much of a detailed background to that sermon. And for those who are interested, it was part of a series of sermons that George Dole gave. This being the last of that series. It was given in the summer of 2021, but there were some sermons he gave in the 2 years previous to that, which are worth looking at and probably putting together into some kind of a booklet. So that's the suggestion. Maybe I'll even look at doing that. So again, greetings to everyone. The name of my talk is Honesty and Openness in the New Church. And it was motivated by the biblical text that George put in his sermon, which is, "For there's nothing hidden which will not be revealed, nor has anything been kept secret, but that it should come to light." That was from Mark chapter 4, verse 22. I have to say, when I first read these lines introducing Reverend Dole's sermon, my thoughts turned to being honest and open, because in the spiritual world, where we will all eventually end up, nothing can really be hidden. In other words, you can go into heaven and hell, read some of the memorable relations there and some of the stories, and you'll notice that the people there cannot really lie. They, if they try to, their very expressions give away what they're thinking. So nothing can be hidden. It will be revealed. So I thought, what would our lives be like, both in the church and in this world, if we practiced being open and honest, knowing that everything we have been keeping secret and hidden will eventually be revealed in the next life. And Reverend Dole also dealt with some of this, that there are things that we really wouldn't want to be revealed, but he also said we shouldn't fear it later on in his sermon. As I say, now we might find ourselves in a bit of a bind. On the one hand, we may desire to be open and honest, both with others and with ourselves, while on the other hand, there are some things we don't want to reveal and don't want to be known. And also, we don't want to acknowledge, especially when this involves being honest with ourselves. I might toss in, since my wife is sitting next to me, that being honest with our wives or husbands also counts into this, that sometimes we don't want to do that, but we feel compelled to. So, in light of new church teachings, how may we be open and honest in our private lives and also in our interactions with others? And looking to new church teachings, we find what I call the following guidelines in the doctrine of life for the New Jerusalem. And I'll little copy of it. Let's see. So somewhere like that. There it is, Doctrine of Life. It's also found in miscellaneous theological works because, as you can see, it's a rather thin book. And it has a lot of lining up with what is taught in the Ten Commandments, especially in true Christian religion and in other treatments of what is said in the Ten Commandments. So in the Lord's New Church, one of the recitations we use in the service is the headings for the doctrine of life. And it's been reproduced in a sheet like that. Again, can't really read it, but I'll read some of it. And this is taken right out of our liturgy. All religion is of life, and the life of it is to do good. We know this very commonly. All religion is related to life, and the life of religion is to do good. And that's a heading in the doctrine of life. And then comes other headings, and I call these guidelines for being open and honest. No one can do good which is good from self, that is, from him or herself. As far as a person shuns evils as sins, so far he does goods, not from self, but from the Lord. That's an important concept in this series, shunning evils as sins. It's what I call the main guideline for being open and honest. As far as a man shuns evils as sins, this is the next one, so far he loves true things or truths. A little other thing about this. George Dole, as you know, could read and translate Latin. Bishop Odhner, who was the bishop in the Lord's New Church, also could read and translate Latin, and he did so while giving his sermons. He would read from the Latin, actually, not from the English, and he would translate it as he went along. But his translations tended to be, shall we say, strict, very literal, yes, very literal. So going through this, I will tend to vary between what he wrote, which is in our liturgy, and turning it into what I call more modern English. So he would say, as far as a man shuns evils as sins, so far he loves true things. I would say truths. As far as anyone shuns evils as sins, so far he has faith and is spiritual. That's one of the headings. The Decalogue teaches what evils are sins. Then it goes on lumping them all together, a bunch of them. Murders, adulteries, thefts, false witnesses of every kind, together with the concupiscence to them, are the evils which must be shunned as sins. A little story here. Many years ago, when I was preaching and giving a sermon, and I'm talking about many years ago, I got tongue-tied over this word concupiscence. And struggling over it several times, I finally changed it and said lusts. because that's what it means. So, together with the lusts for them are the evils which must be shunned. As far as anyone shuns murders of every kind of sin, so far is love towards the neighbor. As far as anyone shuns adulteries of every kind as sins, so far he loves chastity. As far as anyone shuns thefts of every kind of sins, so far he loves sincerity. As far as anyone shuns false witnesses of every kind of sins, so far he loves the truth. By the way, that will be what I'll be talking about a little later. Then it goes on, this is very typical of Bishop Odhner's translations. Not anyone can shun evils as sins so as to be interiorly averse to them, unless through combats against them. That's a hard one to take in. So we would say no one can shun evils as sins so as to be averse, interiorly opposed or averse to them, unless by combats against them. And then he has, man ought to shun evils as sins, and to fight against them as if from self. We would say a person ought to shun evils as sins and to fight against them as if doing from self. And then the last sentence in the headings. If anyone shuns evils out of any other cause whatsoever, then because they are sins, he does not shun them, but only makes that they do not appear before the world. That's a tongue twister also. And you can get the sense of it. If a person shuns evils from any cause that other than that they are sins, he does not shun them, but only makes them to not appear before the world. And so I use that as a quick guideline, but it also gives you an idea of what the liturgy looks like in the Lord's New Church that is still being used in the formal service in the chapel. So I call these headings as guidelines for a person, and I'll start out with that one because George Stoll's sermon, as I saw, was about being honest with ourselves and with others. And so I start out with Doctrine of Life number 87. So far as anyone shuns false witness of every kind as sins, so far he loves truths. In other words, when we shun lying consistently, make it a part of our life, we come into a love of truth. This is true of all of the guidelines here or the commandments. When we shun the sin or the evil that is being talked about, we come into the opposite, and the two just kind of are connected together. We do one, we're at the same time doing the other. Now, it appears that the emphasis on these things is on shunning an evil. And this involves an action, a choice that we must make. On the other hand, we read further in number 87 of Doctrine of Life, which I think has been retitled Teachings Concerning Life or About Life, which is just fine because doctrine is teaching, about bearing false witness. In the natural sense, it says, is meant not only to act as a false witness, but also to practice lying and defamation by bearing false witness, and that's in the literal sense. And we're familiar with that. We can see that by bearing false witness in the spiritual sense, on the other hand, is meant to say and persuade others that what is false is true and what is evil is good, and conversely. And this we have perhaps run into with, we meet up with those who are very clever in argument and can be very, very convincing and persuasive. That they can take what is evil or wrong and try and turn it into being what is right. We do this with ourselves also. When we make excuses for the wrong things that we know that we've done, when we make excuses essentially for what we deep down inside know what is wrong, many of us have a tendency to make excuses for it, to want it to really go away, to cover ourselves over with some uh, reasoning and rationality about it. So, by bearing false witness in the spiritual sense is meant to say and to persuade others what is false is true, what is evil is good, and conversely. But in the highest sense, this is also sometimes called the supreme sense or the celestial sense, by bearing false witness is meant to blaspheme the Lord and the Word. And then it sums up, these are what constitute bearing false witness in the threefold sense. They make one in a person, and they make one in a person who testifies falsely, who tells a lie, who defames another. In other words, just by our engaging in what I would say the external, the most little thing, external thing of lying, defaming others, libeling another, we are engaging in breaking the commandment, and essentially when we're in one, we're in the other. That is, we're blaspheming against the Lord and the Word. And I mentioned these are all actions or choices that we make. We make the choice whether to lie to ourselves or to others. But perhaps we may choose not to lie at all. That is, not to allow ourselves to be deceived, nor to allow ourselves to deceive others. There are people who actually you can rely on to not lie or deceive. They have a high value in telling the truth, sometimes even when it's to their own detriment. And when you tell the truth and do so consistently, it becomes a habit with you. And it's a good habit, and it's a habit that we carry into the other world. As I mentioned in the beginning, when you come into the other world, you can't really lie. It shows up in your words, your actions, and in your facial expressions in the other life. Your face is a dead giveaway to what you're really thinking. And that's true in the other life. It's also true in this life. Some of us, and some of you know who we're talking about, we have trouble lying or misrepresenting, and our facial expressions just give it away. I wish I could see you now, because I just have this image that some of you are looking around at each other, knowing who we're talking about. Yeah, oh, good, now I see you all. So and this is a good thing to have the habit of telling the truth, even when it may be to our detriment, because it's a habit we carry with us into the other world. Now, I want to say a little bit, about referring to George's sermon. In the sermon, he referred to this, and near the end of the sermon, he said, our greatest weapon in the struggle between these two lives, two ways of life, would seem to be honesty, specifically honesty with ourselves. That's the one thing that's sometimes harder to do. We may be able to deceive others, but we can't really deceive ourselves. We can try to, but deep down inside, we know we're doing it. Now, about faith and charity, they go together. The truth is, we cannot have faith if we are not also in charity. The teachings of the word are not given to us just to be reasoned and spoken about. The teachings of the word are given to us so that we may live according to them and come into a life of charity. And I see that as being the goal of the sermons that George Dole was preaching. Really to come into a life of charity. And I realized that he was focused on this, and Guard Perry spoke to it, that he was focused on a life of charity and not just the life of doctrine and faith. In fact, I'm not sure that he used the term doctrine very much, but the word teachings is a good substitute. So, we need to live according to charity and to faith and not turn ourselves into false witnesses, because that is what we're inclined to do, especially when we try to deceive others, and even more especially when we try to deceive ourselves. We're being a false witness, but the main target that we're witnessing against is ourselves. So we should not try to convince ourselves of our own lies and excuses. The teachings of the Word and of the Church do not have life in us until they become charity in act and in deed. And indeed, they need to become charity in act and in actions. It is a life of charity to others which bears witness and confirms the presence of the teachings of the Word within us. The life of charity is seen in our daily lives, and our actions bear witness to the presence of the Lord and of the church within us. With this in mind, I want us to remember the words of the prophet Micah, which somebody else quoted in their talk. To remember the words of the Micah when he wrote, "He has shown you, O man, what is good. What does the Lord require of you but to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God?" Which I believe that was turned into a hymn, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. Yes. So that is my talk, and I guess we'll open the floor to, as Guard keeps saying, we're free to walk around the cabin, move about. So I can't hear you clapping, but that's because the sound is turned off in the hall.
thought you were all having seizures.
You can hear Denise here.
We can't hear anything here.
Yeah, we're not hearing anybody.
I'm sorry. Hugh, I'm holding the microphone to pass. This is David Keating, to pass around to
Okay.
questioners, and we can hear you. And as soon as someone raises their hand, I'm going to give them the mic. Hopefully, we'll get a question.
Okay, you did hear my talk, I hope.
Oh yes,
Okay.
yes, we heard.
Okay.
I heard every word you said.
If not, I'd have to give it over again. But since you heard it, once is enough. So there are questions, comments. If there are criticisms, please be kind and charitable.
Well, I have a question.
That's Denise, whose hand you saw.
Me first, Denise. This is Calvin.
Okay,
Okay, hi. Hugh, thank you so much. So, can you just, okay, what are 3 things that keeps us from being honest with our neighbor? I mean, what is the block here? What is the problem that we can't be honest?
That we have trouble being honest?
Yeah,
Because we can be honest. It's our choice that we choose not to be honest.
reputation, honor, and gain.
okay, so shame,
That would be one of them.
okay. Incrimination, I don't want to be wrong. In fact, I am never wrong. Yeah.
So you said that.
Yeah. Well, we are Odhners. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
And what else?
Reputation,
Reputation.
Right.
honor, gain.
Fear of punishment.
Yep.
And how many of us have had, well, in my case, it was my mother, to be honest, that we would hesitate to tell the truth to.
Right.
Because
We feared
Punishment.
punishment.
Yeah. Okay, so in a way, this is a call to courage. It's a rather courageous thing to be able to tell the truth in the face of all that.
And it wasn't that one of the virtues cited in the IFS as courage?
Yes.
Yeah. And Denise has got her hand up, yeah? So she can talk. She doesn't need the microphone.
am I talking? I mean,
Yes, they hear you.
you can talk? Well, I had a couple of comments. I kept saying how Hugh's talk related to Chelsea's talk. And Chelsea asked how we can align our inner selves with our outer selves. And I think a major answer to that is honesty. First, we tell the truth about what we're feeling, thinking, our reactions. All of those C words and the F words apply to helping our inner selves to come in contact with our outer selves, and or vice versa. And then I had a question that, let's see, is Chelsea still in the room? Or
Yes, she's right there.
Okay.
She's right there.
It's the question of evil. Do all selves want to do good when we get right down to it? And I had a question about being with oneself in a loving way, but it comes down to a question of evil. Do all selves want to do good ultimately? In other words, is this the salvation of the world? If the inner self could just connect properly with the outer self is doing all this harm in the world, can the inner self being brought into alignment with the outer self make such a difference that, is that a cure for evil? In other words, so I always have a question of, where is the Lord? And the Lord is in us, but the Lord is not us. And so the same applies in a sense, to the question of evil. When we get down to the bottom or very inner parts of ourselves, we are not the Lord, but the Lord is there. As you read, Chelsea read shortly into the beginning of her talk, I think. So anyway, that's some questions and some answers. And some thoughts. And then my last one was, I love what Martha said about her thought about parables being the middle ground. That's just perfect, because the Lord said he spoke to them, and without a parable, he spoke to them not. So he always used parables or stories about the outer self to help us come to the inner self. I thought that was a great recognition from that Martha brought out. Anyway, is that too many things to say and then say, can you answer that?
No, that's great, Denise. I don't know if you can hear me. This is Chelsea.
Yes. Yes, I can hear you.
I'll just briefly say a couple of thoughts that came from what you're saying. That one, Swedenborg says evil consists in disconnection. So we are made in the image of God, and so we are inherently designed to receive life, and be conduits of life. And so I think, but obviously, as Swedenborg says, we're given this choice to close ourselves off from that life if we want, and then that's what creates evil, because there's disconnection. We've cut ourselves off from life, from love. So there is this quality of like, we are vessels, so we receive, but we're made in the image of God, or so we can receive that life. And from an IFS perspective, that would simply say, yes, we are, we are designed good, right? Like, doesn't Swedenborg say also that the only predestination is actually predestination to heaven? Like, we would all be good if it weren't for the burdens. And so IFS talks about how parts are not their burdens. And so, but our proprium, our quality of identifying with things, makes us think we are our burdens. So it's like, as long as we're identifying ourselves with the evil and falsity that we have inside of us, then we think we're that. And then but that's what the inner self helps us in understanding, is knowing that we're not our burdens, that we're not, those don't define who we are, and that we are instead designed to receive this life energy and have our true self, our true identity is in this connection with the divine. Don't know, hoping those thoughts touched on what your question was about, but that's what I had in response to hearing you ask your questions. So I'll pass the mic on now.
Hi,
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, Jesse.
Hi, it's Jessie. So I was thinking about lying. I hear from parents, teachers, and I've seen it myself, children who are really, really hurt. They've had just a horrendous life, and they're fostered or adopted, and they will literally do something right in front of you and deny it. Like, you just dropped that glass on purpose in front of me. I didn't do that. No, I didn't. And I've always, I think some of that is sort of fear of punishment, because a lot of these kids have been horrendously punished. But it's also opening up the thought that, the farther you are from feeling loved, you're stuck in that I'm bad, I have this burden, and so you're lying to get through, and you don't think that there's anything else. You don't have, and as kids, feel the love of a new adoptive or foster parent or a friend, or they start feeling loved, they don't lie as much. So I'm just playing around with that in my head.
Hi, this is Johanan Odhner. And I was thinking about that shun evils as sins and how I might say that differently. And sort of the best I could come up with was do not act from fear because it impedes love, or it impedes the inflow of love. And I think that, there's fear on a number of different levels. We've talked about fear of punishment and fear of, these sort of external things. And that doesn't quite for me, but we've also mentioned like shame and those deeper emotions. And I love that one because there's a self-compassion researcher whose name is Christopher Germer, and he has this beautiful framing of shame, which is that it's an innocent emotion. He says shame is an innocent emotion. And what he means by that is that shame it's a bid for agency. If you imagine a very young child who's not getting their needs met, by making it their fault, by appropriating responsibility for that, saying, there must be something wrong with me because I'm not getting my needs met, I'm not getting the love that I need, so there must be something wrong with me. And by claiming that, by latching onto that, it's a bid for agency, because if there's something wrong with me, maybe I can work hard to become worthy of love. Maybe I can do something to get rid of that badness, and then I'll get the love I need. Then I will be loved. And so it's this bid for agency that's predicated on a false belief, which is that it's your fault, or there's something you did that made it so that you're not getting the love you need from your caregivers. And so even that, there's fear in there, right? Fear that I'm not getting my needs met, but it becomes something else. And so when we're acting on that belief, which was generated from this desperate need to have our needs met, that's, it really impedes our ability to receive love and to be loving toward ourselves. Because, if I think I'm bad and I'm wrong and I'm unworthy and I'm inadequate, it really gets in the way of me connecting to others and being able to give and receive love. So that's the thought I had about shunning evils as sins. I don't know if somebody else wants to. There's Trevor.
Hi, Hugh. Hi, Denise. We miss you.
We miss you too, a lot.
A few things I just wanted to add in about reasons why people aren't honest all the time, and some of them have really good intentions. The little white lie, we don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. And we don't want to tell somebody that, they have spinach in their teeth. We don't want to, we don't want to embarrass somebody else by telling them what we think. And it's usually loving, and it's usually we care for this person and we don't want them to feel bad. And there's also, they just don't want to know. My mom, don't ask, don't tell, but my mom had a don't tell, don't want to know policy. She told all 8 of us kids that, if you do something that I don't like and I didn't see you do it, don't tell me. I don't want to know. So, she taught us very carefully not to tell her stuff. So it's often, I don't know about often, but it can very well be from good intentions that we don't share our feelings. I mean, I don't want to say, I don't know what that word means in the middle of your talk and interrupt it for everybody. I don't want to say, I'm ignorant, I can't figure out what in the world is going on right now. So it's often for lots of different reasons and aren't necessarily bad.
Thank you. anyone else? I did think earlier I saw Guard's hand up, but I don't see it up now.
Well, I can just comment on that. What was the purple bracelet thing that was happening a few years ago? One of the questions that you'd ask yourself is it kind? Is it useful? As well as, is it honest? And I think that that sort of fills in what your mom was getting at. Is it really useful to tell your mom, well, I scaled a building in the middle of the night with 6 other guys and we got arrested? You might, that was one of my kids. I might not have wanted to know that necessarily. Nobody got hurt. So is it kind, is it useful, along with all the honesty parts of that?
Reverend Allison here, Lane Olson. I just, I'm hoping I'm not losing my train of thought here, but I just wanted to, just a couple of the comments just kind of stirred something within me, and I was just thinking, there's sort of like that more knowing conscious level of like when we're maybe not sharing something more truthfully, like even like Trevor said, like there's spinach in your teeth and we're like not wanting to hurt someone's feelings, or we're whatever that may be that we're more conscious of. But I'm also just thinking with the comments around children too, or maybe not feeling loved, that there is this deep, I'm going to call it like a wound of separation, where we are feeling this disconnect from God, from that God self that lives within us. And it just is a call to have compassion for ourselves, I think, that we're operating out of a place of distortion sometimes, so it's how to offer ourselves compassion, to know that if we're not being as honest as we can, it may be because our very foundational truths sometimes are not whole. Like if we're working on foundations that say either I'm not lovable or I'm not worthy, we're building everything else on top of that in our responses and our relationships. And I'm just thinking, just to have some compassion with ourselves for trying to be in alignment in all ways. And so the honest, it all works together. I'm not sure how else to say that.
This is David Keating. Denise, when you mentioned a bracelet, I thought you were going to mention another one I thought of. That some years ago, that it was popular among teenagers at the time, and they would look at it if they were thinking of doing something, maybe saying something, and said, "What would Jesus do?" And that
yeah.
And I thought that was a wonderful idea, and it would be, what would Jesus say, or what would Jesus do? Would fit this situation of honesty too, but not hurting people, like what Trevor was saying. What would Jesus say, or what would he be quiet about, or what would he do?
Yeah.
This is one of those discussions that makes me incredibly grateful for Swedenborg's, the holistic nature of Swedenborg's perspective, because even the illusion that we're separate from the divine is, we understand, or Swedenborg makes sense of it by saying, well, in order for us to feel free to be in relationship, there has to at some level be this illusion of separation, right? We can't love other people and we can't be in relationship to the divine unless we have that feeling that we are our own, because then we can freely love, and it's not coercive, it's not just one big mush. But even that permission, or that illusion that we're in any way separate, creates the possibility that we can feel really separate. We can really pull away. Like, we have the freedom to do that. And because that's the only way that we can actually feel a sense of genuine connection without just being lost in the oneness. And so it's really, I think that's such a key piece of it, is all of those fears. So many fears boil down to the fear of being disconnected, and the fear of being alone, and the fear of not being loved, or not being in relationship. And it's no accident, right? It's no accident that those are our deepest fears a lot of the time, is disconnected and alone, because it's what we long for, and it's what we're created for, is to connect. And so all of that, and thus the possibility, right, of falsity and evil, because there's an appearance that we are separate, and that when we act on that, it becomes evil, because it prevents the connection, it prevents the inflow that we're all created to feel in relationship to each other and in relationship to the divine.
Okay. There's a hand in the back.
Hi, Hugh, it's Becky. I'm in the back. I have Kent Rogers watching on YouTube, and he's responding to Jesse. And he says, in response to Jesse, I wrote a paper exploring the connection between childhood trauma and chronic or pathological lying. I concluded, rightly or wrongly, that this form of lying was due to a need to create an alternate reality from the horrible external one. I noted in the 2 real case studies I was looking at that both parties adored animals, and that the animals were safe and warm and fuzzy, mirroring kindness and love. For such cases, it seems like safe, non-judgmental, forgiving compassion is what can bring about an increase in honesty. We can attempt to offer that to others and to self. And then that is what the Lord Jesus offers and reveals, and we can take of that to give to others. I think this is why the Lord is the Savior. He is love itself. And that's from Kent Rogers.
Well, thank you, Kent. I assume he's listening in?
Yeah, he's watching on YouTube. Isn't that great?
Wow.
Yeah. That's good. There was something else that I noticed going on, which I really liked. It's both of us together on the same screen.
Oh, you like that?
I thought it was really nice, and said, "Did somebody take a photo of this, please?"
Okay.
Because I like it. And playing around with it is interesting. If I move one way or the other, Denise will go in focus or out of focus. It doesn't seem to happen to me, but it happens to her.
Oh, because you're the center of attention.
Yeah, that's it.
Well,
So-
while you've got their attention, I'll just say how nice it is to be connected to you by Zoom.
Yeah.
And it's almost like being there, not quite, but I'm just so happy to be connected to you and to be able to see all these wonderful talks and to hear what everybody has to say.
And I want to give a shout out to Martha, who's been regularly in there. And we've had some conversations with her, and
Hugh?
also Dave. Yes.
We're at end time. We have a few announcements. Hugh, thanks for this wonderful talk. It's good to see the both of you.